The latest expansion release for the hololive official card game is right around the corner. We have Quintet Spectrum releasing on October 17th. So I thought now would be a good time to take a look at the first set of Blooming Radiance and do a little bit of analysis on the tier list for set 1, talking about some of the changes that we can possibly anticipate going into set 2, including ban lists that may affect us. Granted, please note that this is based off of the Japanese meta. We haven't gotten any official confirmation on what restrictions may be applying outside of Asia territories. It's safe to assume in large part that whatever restrictions Japan got, we're going to get. But since they've had more time to reflect on it, it's possible that we might see a different ban list. Maybe we won't see a ban list at all. But with that said, if you're a fan of the hololive card game and you like what I'm doing on this channel, please consider subscribing and ringing that bell. It helps me a lot and helps grow the channel. I love yapping about this stuff, so anything you do to support would be much appreciated. So moving on from that, let's get to it. As you can see right here in set 1, the S tier decks, the top 2 reigning supreme over everyone else are Mume Promise and Mono Amane Kanata. These are pretty well established within the community. Most people who are playing know this by now, but let's talk a little bit about each of these decks and where they kind of earn their place around here. I'm not going to do super in-depth on every single deck, but let's talk a bit about Mume Promise. Right now, in set 1 in Blooming Radiance, this is the deck to be looking out for. It's just incredibly strong. The Mume Oshi skill allows you to reduce damage taken by 50 for the cost of only 2 holo power, which is a huge boon. Also, the debut Mume card is able to bloom into the first bloom Mume that lets you search for any other debut or first bloom holomem with the hashtag promise. So essentially any other promise holomem. It can also search out your either Crony or Iris. Crony First Bloom lets you grab a cheer from your cheer deck and attach it to any one of your promise holomem with the corresponding cheer color. Iris First Bloom is incredibly strong, and its ability can stack. Really, all these abilities stack, actually. Mume, Iris, and Crony First Bloom, you can just keep playing them as long as you have the ability to bloom. But Iris First Bloom increases the attack power of your collab and center position holomem by 30. So basically, Mume Promise is just a very well-rounded deck. There's a lot of search, there's a lot of attack power, there's a lot of cheer acceleration. So that's why it has really earned its place at the top here. If you see my best deck for your buck, I go into more specifics on the card lists that go into Mume Promise and Kanata, but this deck is what we affectionately call an Unga Bunga deck. Just tons of damage, just damage upon damage, taking extra life on downing a holomem. It's just crazy, crazy strong with very little drawback. So most people put Mume Promise above Kanata just because of consistency. But really, most decks can't do anything to stop Kanata if they have the ideal board state. She has a debut Kanata that can do 40 damage just for 1 cheer. And the only drawback, if you can even call it that, is that it can only attack the center position holomem, which, oh no, you can only attack the primary holomem on your opponent's side of the board. That's such a bummer. Then you have the other debut Kanata, which once you collab with it, for that turn, your center holomem gets arts plus 10. But in this deck, really, it's arts plus 30, because if your center holomem has hashtag Gen 4, which all of the cards, all the holomem in your mono Kanata deck will have, it does an extra 20. So if you go second as the Kanata player, and you have both of those debut, you can put the 40 attack Kanata in the center position, collab with the other Kanata, and then your center is swinging for an easy 70 damage. And that's not accounting for the fact that if you somehow find a way to accelerate a cheer onto the other Kanata, the collab position one can attack for another 20. You can attach a stone axe to the center position to do another 20. So even without the cheer addition on the collab, your center Kanata can do 90 damage on its first turn to attack, which is disgusting considering most debut holomem have around 90 HP. Some are 100, but it's an insane amount of damage to be able to do so easily and so quickly. There's also the first bloom Kanata that just by blooming does 30 damage to your opponent's center holomem. So your center holomem is just going to be taking so much damage from her. And the big brawler in this deck is, of course, a second bloom Kanata, which is crazy in its own right. So if you have two of them, you could collab with one, which gets you its collab effect, which you deal 50 special damage to your opponent's center holomem. So again, it's just damage on damage on damage. And then the attack that she has, it does base 100, but if you down your opponent and by an extra 50 damage over their HP, they have to take an extra life from their life if they're downed this way. So there's also plenty of other ways to make that 100 base power much higher. As we talked about, there's the debut holomem that you can collab with that gives you that plus 30, but also you're spreading all this damage to the center with these other bloom effects, so you can really bring down your opponent's HP. And that's not to mention the Oshi card, which we haven't talked about yet. The Oshi Kanta card has a skill that reduces your opponent's center holomem to 50 HP. They could have a 220 HP holomem second bloom in the center, and now it's at 50 HP just for that one skill. It's insanely strong. Many people consider Kanta to actually be the #1 deck in this format, but as you can see, both are just really strong in their own right. One is maybe just more consistent than the other, but that's where these two earned their titles as top tier in this set. Now, before I move on to the rest of the tiers, I think we should talk a little bit about the potential upcoming ban list. So in Japan, this is what the restriction/ban list looks like. So that debut Kanata that I was just talking about, that you collab to do an extra 30 damage with your center #Gen4 holomem, that one gets restricted to 1 copy, which makes sense because you can run 4 of that normally. And it's just, if you have 2 of those on the board and you can just collab every turn for extra 30 if your opponent can't get it off the board. Granted, she's very soft, she has 60 HP, but it doesn't even matter really because you're just going to be getting so many knockouts. And then Mume gets hit the hardest with 2 cards being restricted to 1 copy. There's the very strong First Bloom Mume that we talked about that lets you search for other Promise holomem debut and First Bloom, and then the First Bloom Iris that increases your center position and collabs attack power by 30 for that turn, which again stacks. So if you multiple First Bloom Iris, it's insane. So I think it's understandable why they reduce these to 1 copy. Unfortunately, even after this restriction list, if we take a sneak peek at the set 2 tier list here, you can see that Kanata stays the top deck even with that nerf. She's still incredibly strong. We do get at least some movement with some of the new cards like Reine and Marin making their debuts as Oshis, and they're both very strong. And there's different ways to play Reine, so we'll get more into that. I'll do a separate video that talks more about the Quintet Spectrum metagame in a separate video. For now, I just want to talk about the Blooming Radiance expansion and how you should prepare going into set 2, what you can kind of expect. So with that said, you also see now that Mume Promise is quite low on the tier list. It's no longer the golden child, unfortunately. It's kind of sad because it's a really fun deck and I love Promise, but those nerfs hit her really hard. So Kanata is still incredibly well positioned going into this format, despite the possible restriction we may be getting from the Japanese meta. And this is kind of a good segue into what is considered the next best deck in the Blooming Radiance set, which is the Polka build. Polka is a really fun deck. It's actually one of my favorites to play, but the downside of playing Polka is that she is a red cheer, and she is weak to both Kanata, Promise, and Suisei. They all do attacks that have weakness going into red cheer. So all the decks around her are able to hit her for extra damage, which is nuts. I don't know why they gave red cheer so many weaknesses in this set, but it really does a number to them. But despite that, it still remains a really great deck. The way that Polka functions is that you rely on her first buzz. You can search it with the spot Pecora. You put her in the clap position, you roll dice, and if you get the right result, you can search a first buzz holomem from your deck, and you run the debut Kiara just for the sake of being able to attach KFP to it. You can attach as many KFP as you want, so you can get its effect by discarding a card and then drawing a card, which is really great draw power, and you want to get stuff in the archive because it'll set off effects of other cards that you're running in the deck. For example, the first Buzz Polka, when it blooms, you are able to grab a fan from your archive and add it back to your hand. And the first Buzz does extra damage for each fan that's attached to all of your holomem, which is really great because you can stack all those KFPs on Kiara. You can stack the Rabbit Alliance on Pecora, and you can attach as many as you want of each to those holomem. So Kiara's going to be stacked with KFPs. Pecora is going to be stacked with rabbits. And the other effect of that fan card is that if you don't get what you want on the dice roll, you can archive the attached fan and then you get a reroll. So the consistency of this deck is not too bad. It moves really fast. You thin out your deck pretty quickly, and it hits for a ton of damage with that first Buzz Polka. Really, the only thing holding it back is those weaknesses, in my opinion. I think otherwise it'd be really strong. But that's why you see such a significant gap between the top decks and then A tier. A plus tier just like doesn't even exist in this format. So that's why you'll see here noted in the restriction list decks like Polka and Kiara Polka, Polk Kiara, whatever you want to call it, get buffed. And just red decks in general get buffed because of that, right? You see Takane, you see Marine, they all get buffed. And they're going to be much stronger going into set 2 because there's less threats from that weakness going into the next expansion. Now looking at set 1 again, onto the next best decks, you have Suisei, which is a blue cheer deck. This deck is just really great at spreading damage across the board, kind of similar to how Kanata can, but just not quite as good. But it has a lot of really strong mechanics that can really turn around a game. The real downside to the Suisei deck, why it's not stronger, is that it's a pretty slow start. You can play her with Muna, some other cards that help with spreading special damage, but generally speaking, Suisei takes a bit of time to set up and then is stronger late game. But once she starts doing her thing, the damage is crazy, and her Oshi will let you do the damage of one of your attacks a second time that turn. I was playing against someone with the Polka deck, and they're attacking for weakness, and I think they literally did 240 damage with Stone Axe and all the other cards that they needed to get her to max power, because the second bloom lets you archive 2 of the attached tier for even more damage. So not only did they knock out my first Buzz Polka in the center position, but they were able to just use their Oshi skill to take out 1 on my backstage as well, which is just disgusting, and one of the reasons why it's really hard to play Polka in this format. So that's what makes Suisei so strong. And right next to Suisei, we can see Azuki. This deck is pretty solid. It's not game-breaking, it's not broken, but it's just very consistent. You basically are able to accelerate cheer very quickly, and you're able to maintain cheer, especially if instead of running the Azuki Oshi, you run the Pecora Oshi. The Pecora Oshi lets you, for the cost of 2 hollow power, when one of your holomem is down, you can keep all the cheer attached to that holomem and spread it across your board of holomem however you'd like. So basically it's really hard to lose cheer, and even if one of your holomem gets downed and they had 4 cheer attached, you can just move it to your next one and set up another second bloom Azuki or whatever it is you're going for. So it's really hard to slow down Azuki. The only problem really with Azuki that holds her back is that it's very RNG dependent. So one of the sacrifices you make if you're not running the Azuki Oshi is that there's a second bloom Azuki that when you roll die, depending on the result, you get plus 50 or plus 100 if you roll a 1. And the Azuki Oshi can guarantee what number you roll. So you can just declare that you roll a 1 with that Oshi skill, and you're going to be getting a guaranteed 200 attack. You lose that with Pecora, but it's kind of just depending on what trade-off you prefer. I honestly really like playing this with Pecora because I love the consistency of just being able to set up as many second bloom Azuki as possible and never losing cheer. It can be really difficult to deal with. I think what also positions Azuki well in this format is that one of her second blooms has an attack that hits white for weakness. So she does fairly well going into the top 2 decks. Obviously, it's not super strong, like those are the 2 top decks for a reason, but if you're kind of looking for an anti-meta deck, Azuki is a pretty solid option. You can really catch people off guard with the second bloom that, with weakness, will attack for 170. And if you want to take a Stone Axe into your deck, you can knock out second bloom Mume with 1 attack, because second bloom Mume has 190 HP. And also, Second Bloom Iris only has 200 HP, so if you get the 170 attack from one Second Bloom and you just have any other collab position hololive that can attack, you can likely knock out Second Bloom Iris very quickly as well. So depending on how they format their board and play their cards, if they don't expect that Second Bloom Azuki to come out, it's pretty crazy, especially if they knock it out and you're running Pecora and you save all those cheer that you attach to it and put it back onto your other one. It's kind of nuts. And if you get insanely lucky and you're running the other Second Bloom Azuki into that matchup and you roll 1, you're doing 200, you know, it really makes it easier to get that 200, because normally if you don't roll a 1 and if you get an odd number, it adds plus 50. So you get the 100 plus the 50 from the dice roll. Unfortunately, the other Second Bloom Azuki does not hit for weakness into white. It hits for weakness into blue, but also, you know, makes it good against Suisei, which is a pretty popular deck to be running. So it covers a lot of options quite well. Honestly, in my opinion, I would put Azuki higher than what is on this particular tier list. For those that don't know, I'm referencing the Holo Archive. This is cataloged by the community member Chocolat, so highly recommend supporting them, and I'll put links to this and the fan Discord in the description down below as always. So thank you to the community and to Chocolat for tracking the Japanese meta through this doc, and you can find awesome deck lists to help you start your game. But that's kind of my rundown of the top decks in Blooming Radiance. There is the Zeta Muna deck here that revolves around the First Buzz, but I'll be honest, I can't speak to it that well because I never really see anyone play it. I haven't played against it, I haven't played it myself, and I think despite being an A tier, it's probably the lower end of A tier as if this is in order. And because I'm not seeing a lot of people play it, I just assume it's not super threatening. But if you're interested in that, recommend using the Holo Archive to look into that deck list as well, but I'm not going to spend time on it here. I'll talk a little bit about some of the other decks below. I already mentioned that Red Cheer is in a really tough position, so that's why you see Kiara, Polka, and B tier. The version that focuses on Polka is much more consistent. You can play a version with more Kiara cards, which is also really fun, and it's pretty cool, but that combination gets much better later on. But in this format, you're better off really just running on that Polka focus and attaching as many fans as possible and relying on that First Buzz attack. Pecora, really great option for the Azuki build. On its own, if you're playing a mostly Pecora build outside of just the Oshi, she's just a card that relies a lot on RNG, and that's never great for consistency, so not terribly strong. Sora in C tier. This is one of the starter decks you get. You get the Oshi card for Sora as well as Azuki in it, as well as some of their staple cards. Sora can actually be quite good, but it's just definitely not consistent enough, and it's not overwhelmingly strong. If you get really, really lucky, you can do some insane knockouts, but I think really what holds her back, besides just the RNG factor, is that her game plan is very linear. There's not a lot that she can do outside of her game plan, which is just basically powering up her Second Bloom, Sora, trying to get the dice roll to get as many hits as possible for an easy knockout, and getting as many stone axes and other buffs on the board as possible just to swing for damage. She's very aggro, but it's like a worse version of Kanata aggro, right? Like, you're not able to spread damage like crazy. There's RNG involved. So as far as aggro decks go, it's just not very consistent, not super overwhelming, but it's a fun deck to play. And I think pretty much anything Sora and above is going to do pretty well. You know, this is really looking at it at a super competitive level. So if you're not looking to play hyper competitive or anything, pretty much all these decks do fairly well. But obviously I would recommend, if you are competing, to not go below A tier. You know, there's some surprises. Like, I've seen people play Aki Rosenthal. She's not that strong. She gets extra effects off of Stone Axe that other characters don't, but sadly just other decks benefit more from the default Stone Axe ability than she does, even with the extra perk. Takane, you don't really see much play. I honestly don't know much about what that deck does because I don't see it, so I'm not going to spend too much time there. And Kobo, as much as it saddens me to say it, is just one of the weakest decks of this format, and throughout the meta, it takes a very long time for her to find her footing in the meta. And even then, she's not overwhelmingly strong. I love Kobo, that is my ID Oshi, but it's just sad that she's not the strongest as far as the card game goes. But that is my rundown of the Blooming Radiance tier list and upcoming potential ban list. If you found this video informative and interesting, please give it a thumbs up. It helps a lot. And if you like what I'm doing here and you like hololive and you like card games, consider hitting that subscribe button. ringing that bell. It really helps the channel a lot. I'm almost at 100 subscribers, so it would mean a lot to me if you did subscribe and stick around for the rest of my content. I'm planning on doing more, and I'm really excited to cover Quintet Spectrum as more information comes out about that. So be on the lookout for my next tier list video where we break down why certain decks are where they are, and I'm also going to cover some of the cards that you're really going to want to look out for in the next expansion, the staple cards and some of the strong cards that you're going to want. So thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye!
Hi, Cameron.